say, okay, we don't know if we can afford to do this, but we would like people to bid and come in and design the network. There's OFS, there's Corning that do a really good job from a fiber perspective. My friends happen to be Nokia, and Adtran does it, and all the other people that you know from electronics perspective and how you service it, and they got really good engineers. That costs money. You either ask, and I don't know the CTC would be the right consultant to actually do the design and get to the brass tacks by award. It may have to be someone else, and I don't know what that would cost, but CTC can. They do have people in-house, I think they can do it, but that's what I think we need to really know.
So,
There's another way that we could go about it too.
Okay.
Sorry, go ahead. I don't know what kind of time it would take because I wasn't involved the first time around, but what if we followed up kind of on what I had mentioned at the last meeting when CTC was here about maybe, since they've discovered that writing a grant is really out of the picture given the status of funding. Pardon?
We're St. Louis County, that's why we're
Yes,
eliminated.
right. And so since that's not an option, then maybe, I said, well, would you be willing instead maybe to do an RFP for us? And I'd like to see the RFP go out, so as part of our information, 'cause we can do a combination of these things, I think.
I'm not disagreeing with you. When my eyes go back here, I'm starting to go through all the different things
Okay.
that go into an RFP and how that might work. So
I mean,
it's
if
not
they would come up with one and we could put it out and it could go to Charter, it could go to AT&T, it could go to the providers, and, maybe it's severable and that they could, propose Chinese menu wise, but there would be options.
I think,
And we'd know pricing because that's probably pretty close to what they're willing to.
I would ask the Bays guys if they got an RFP for the entire city of Wildwood and you had unlimited resources you could pay for it, no matter what. And you looked at the architecture, what would you think?
Yeah, most of it in front of you is what I handed out when I walked in. A price tag for the majority of the southern portion of Wildwood.
Is this it right here? And what is this?
That is the...
I don't see numbers on here. Am I missing a sheet that
I
you
get
gave?
my award numbers mixed up. I apologize on that part. This
No, I
is-
think mine's blank.
well, you do it with
Did you get one of
me.
these?
Oh, shoot. Thank you. I got it.
The back of the written page goes with the map. This was the segments that I'd used to break down the fiber build. I went through and took the time to map out what it's going to take to actually deploy fiber in all those areas and got approximate price tags with it.
That's fiber to the home or that's fiber to,
Fiber to the home.
From your source to
including the last
What ward?
Start to finish.
attached to the home?
6, probably.
Ward 6. Start
This
to
is
finish
Ward
from
6.
the head end to the home.
How much of Ward 6 is this? 460 homes out of 597, is that what I'm reading?
No, 460 and 597 total parcels. That means there's no homes probably on it, I'm gonna guess.
Yes, the difference between the parcels and the homes. Hawks Rest was skipped because we're already building it. There's no need to count it again.
So are there 460 homes in Ward 6, or are there more?
460 parcels marked as developed.
Okay, all right.
So
And
just
within this, what you're saying, that you'd split it, you'd pay,
This goes back to the original conduit plan that I had proposed to start
Right.
with. I was taking that and breaking it down into different segments and then what it would cost us to take that initial build and take it from the conduit, from the taps, from the handholds, take it to the homes and finish it.
So you're saying, help me out here, so I don't have to read everything. So 2.4 million is what it's gonna cost you?
The combined for the total projects.
And Bays would pay 1.4?
1.4 would be the estimated build.
And so
cost.
you would be
Wildwood less
asking for
than
the
one.
you would be asking for the cash incentive of
974,000.
$1 million.
close to $1 million. So that would be option F, basically, however we got the funding. So from that point, from your design, and you're saying that all of Ward 6 would be covered under this plan?
Yes.
Okay, so,
There we go.
I'd like to make a motion that we make this.
Right there.
so we know that Ward 6, we know
You're
what the
shaking your
cost.
head.
So, pardon me.
No, it's all good, keep going.
Because I want to make sure this,
Clarify as you go. Yeah.
this is not all of Ward 6.
That's I didn't check the ward maps. Those were the parcels that were affected by the areas of the build. Hawks Rest was skipped on that map because we're already developing it.
But Ward 6, just using just a raw number, if there's 600 total parcels represented on this map, each being 3 acres, that's 1,800 acres. Ward 6 is probably, what,
You should look at that.
20 square miles?
Well, it's, yeah, it would be,
No, it's not 20 square miles, it's
Remember, Ward 1 and Ward 6,
or the biggest.
geographically speaking, are the largest,
Yeah,
because we have to keep population amongst the wards at
3 acre minimum.
about 5,000.
Oh, oh, gotcha.
right, so if we have 37,000 people, 8 wards, there's 4,625 people per ward. And if you divide it by 2.8, which is our average household size, it's 1,651 parcels. So this is 600 parcels
Parcels that are
So at
developed.
least half
in each,
Ward 6.
in each ward.
Are those parcels that are developed?
Well, it's based on population, so it's just, yes, they
Oh,
would
okay.
all be.
Because you
it's
put
just
the
a
people in it,
figure.
right.
They roughly divided by the people, they came up with the number of houses, basically.
Per the population, it would be 1,651 developed parcels per ward.
So I was going to say, in my mind, we wouldn't be striving to get undeveloped parcels because that would be part of the development of it, right, to extend out. But an RFP is going to give this kind of information, and it's going to let us know what kind of solutions are available.
I'm not being critical of
No.
ACT, all I'm saying is, this is not all of Ward 6.
I got you.
It's what, roughly a third or a half?
At least a half, based upon just a real rough calculation done here in the last 10 seconds.
Yep. To go a little further with it, there are areas that were intentionally skipped with, we're either developing them with fiber, or they have existing charter service or prime AT&T service. Westwood Drive in that region has charter. We're developing Hawks Rest, so that was 98 parcels that was skipped over. Some of Old Manchester Road, Melrose, and Bouquet will be developed as we get our main line through, so that was also skipped on this map. And then Melrose Road, Melrose Woods Drive, and Great Meadows Road all have AT&T service. So the majority of what you see on this map is either lit, so it was skipped, under construction, so it wasn't needed to be marked, or is only served by wireless and or not served and needs developed.
Could you update that and tomorrow send it with, some bullets to say these areas were skipped for the following reason?
Sure.
Yeah, because, where I
Send
live
it
in
to
Ward
Joe.
6, I have charter. Everyone's dropping AT&T because their internet's no good, but
And it
In-
kind of
in my
depends
area.
on that. There's plenty of updates to do to it. I'm of course not done, but I'm going through the entire plant design to have a solid number of what it's gonna take to get it done, doing fiber to the home.
Joe, was your thought that this, not just the blue, but the entire page does not encompass Ward 6 geographically?
It does not.
So,
You suggesting that?
would you be able to, if he would like, send him what the Ward 6 is, just so he can do a double check before he
Right.
responds back to you? Or I don't know if we have that Kathy, it could be emailed right now to him.
We, for election purposes, for candidates, we break down all 8 wards into separate maps, so we can provide that. I just don't, this is everything south of Route 100 for the most part, which that's what it looks like to me.
Yes, 100
West of the
MT.
parks
But a lot of Ward 6 is still north of Route 100. so-
and east of the parks.
And east of the parks.
Right, so I think that, we could just get that clarification, and to the extent that he's saying, we already commit, we'll do these without the funding, that's good to know. But
But
that's ad hoc. I think that, again, getting an RFP that allows for a vendor to say, you know what, I'm not taking the whole apple, but I'll take this bite of it.
But again, just if we use our kind of rough calculation, if there's 1,200 parcels in Ward 6, and all of them were of some similar situation, the numbers would double at least.
And parcels are not homes, that's just, they could be built on.
Correct.
So 597, there's 460 homes on 597 parcels available, or Is there 460 and another? Yeah, I think that's what he's saying, total parcels, so.
There's 597 parcels that's lit in blue, 460 of those parcels are built.
And you were saying that of those that are built, there's around 1,200. Right, so this number is almost a little over a third.
And there's 1,600. If you just math out the
That even
population.
makes it a bigger, even maybe a fourth, but let's just say a third. So if you were to extrapolate that, I don't know if this is the right numbers, but just for,
I got it.
yeah, you got it, so we're at 3 million roughly.
Well,
Something.
I took the $1 million would be the city offering incentives, offer cash incentives to help them. And I just put $1 million of what the city's part of this, if we went in. Of the 597 total parcels, whoever owns that land, like someone could own multiple parcels, right? But it would be somewhere around, divide that by $1 million, and that's $1,675 per parcel.
I think that's why it's really important as one of the takeaways that we get in our next step from the consultant, if we can get by ward, geographic exactitude of where the problem is, because as to what Chris was mentioning earlier, there are parts of this that's already got charter. I consider charter as the full-blown solution. In the case of AT&T, some of those are just copper AT&T, and I do not count that or UVerse as a solution because they're leaving that behind. So it would have to be fiber to the home, I would say, with AT&T.
Are we going down a road, just for clarification, that is above and beyond the terms of the agreement with the consultant? It sounds like we are.
Councilmember Jordan kind of mentioned that we had two components of the current contract, the actual analysis and then the grant component. The grant component obviously has been taken off the
Right,
table.
we could somehow
So
make that even.
the question would be is, do we use that
I like that.
funding to basically engage them to do an RFP?
I would be willing to make a motion to that effect. Would that be appropriate?
I don't think I need a motion right now. I'm more inclined just to call Ms. Hovis or Mr. Ast and say, could you submit a proposal to do an RFP based upon the combination of approaches ultimately the committee agrees to?
I would like that
I
as
think
soon
that's
as
a good one
possible.
to put as one of the things we want to probably have done, and we can review at the end of the meeting, make sure that's where we're going. What comes to my mind here, and I haven't cranked the numbers, you're cranking numbers over there, maybe you
I
can
just
do it.
looked at one, but
But-
Kathy's been doing some
Well,
calculating
so-
too, so.
So I don't know, so if there's, this is for 460 homes, I'm just looking at the base, I think you were looking at parcels, but you're saying there's 1,600 homes roughly, let's call it 1,200, let's call it 3 times that. So if that's his 3 times, then we're looking at a contribution incentive of 3 million.
I made an assumption that he's going to pass 597 parcels. So if he does that, and there's 460 homes that he serves, it's gonna cost him, because you can't just stop, you gotta keep going with the fiber, you're going by them.
Can't jump
So
on.
once you built it, the assumption would be that people would start developing homes because they had broadband. And so there's a cost to serve. And so am I right on my assumptions of what you?
Correct. We
So
look at this to
it's $1
build this-
million price tag, and so if you're gonna do an assessment and you're gonna make people pay, it's by parcel, and you figure out that. So the city gets their money back on the cash incentives and the broadband. Now, I'm also making an assumption you would own all the fiber, that would be your assets, and the city would not own any of it, or would we own a portion of the assets for $1 million?
The way I set this up is the city would pay for the conduit. We'd be responsible for the fiber in the conduit, so we'd be renting space and a conduit from you. So we maintain ownership of the fiber so we can manipulate it.
And we own the conduit?
Do-
Control the
Right.
conduit.
And
So
most
conduit's cheap,
importantly,
always
just-
lay extra conduit.
Well, I guess the question would be, would you require exclusive use of the conduit?
As a businessman, that'd be great, but as someone here to help solve the problem, that'd be a horrible idea.
Yeah, we would-
So
yeah, we would
therein, we
never-
wouldn't necessarily have to lay more
We
than
would allow
one.
people to access the conduit because others would come in and compete against it once the things got built up. Say a big, huge hospital complex comes in, you think the big guys aren't gonna run fiber right to that because it's big business. But nonetheless, right?
Well, with all due respect to Mr. Bay, we charge a fee for each customer that's served off one of our poles. I think we would also want a fee if we only own the conduit.
So we need to have recuperation too, and then a combination of assessment.
Oh, maybe.
Wait.
That would be something to discuss.
We don't,
I haven't gotten to the assessment yet.
I'm just, we're whiteboarding here,
Yeah.
right? I'm not saying we're gonna do it.
But conduit, I see it as an asset, but it's not,
I know what you're saying.
it's not fiber.
Correct.
Fiber is what makes the world go round, so to speak.
And that means anyone wants access to the fiber in the future, then they would pay us for the fiber that we own and the city would own. However, if we own the conduit, then we would charge them access to be able to use the conduit, so it would save them construction costs.
It would solve some of the legal problems too, because
So-
we at least have ownership,
Yes,
that part, but,
I mean, Mr.
So,
Ray's being sensitive to that, I think, by allowing the conduit.
yeah, I can see.
Well,
that.
depending on how much fiber, what was your strands that you would run through that to serve?
It's gonna vary based on the needs of the area.
Just rough guess, would it be 92, 72?
The main line
140?
areas, it's going down 100. We probably run ribbon, run 768 or something.
768, all right, so you would, if you want to negotiate, then you would say, all right, let me own X amount of that, and then you could lease dark fiber. And he's a business guy, and it would be negotiable, we would owe him more money than $1 million, I'm sure, if he put in the fiber in, so.
Because he had his numbers over on the other side of that.
Well, no, he's saying that, this is for conduit, so he's declared that we owe $1 million if we gave a cash incentive and we own the conduit. If we want to start owning the fiber, to your point, then that would be negotiable, and I'm sure we would owe more than $1 million
Yeah.
if we want to have that. And that's something, part of the negotiation that you would have with businesses.
So, actually, where I was starting to go, we're going down so many rabbit holes here, I don't keep it organized, but where I was, it feels like these numbers, and I was trying to multiply them out in my head to homes and stuff, and then Ward 1 and all that stuff. This is the whole kit and caboodle here. So if we're looking at the 60, 40, 50 to $60 million for the
That's
A,
right.
B, and C, it feels like, and I was trying to multiply those numbers out, where do your numbers hit compared to, because you probably looked over this whole thing.
his are a whole heck of a lot less.
Well, I think, but I haven't done the math. to know.
Yeah, he has though.
I have.
That's why I'm asking. And
The,
that could be a challenge for our consultants to explain the difference, or if it's totally legit, maybe they should be talking to you about getting the numbers.
And those are great
And
points.
then coming up with a plan as our consultants to engage you guys to do it.
Because I know you mentioned
I
that
don't
you
think
thought
they've
the
really
numbers
gone
were a
that
little
route.
on the high side based on the things that you had seen. So I think that would be an interesting thing to ask the consultant to jive with.
when you get into the underground business, there's, from what I've learned from talking to everyone else in it, there's two levels. You've got your master contractors, the Mastech, the ADB, the huge companies you see running around. They'll charge a particular rate. Nationally, it's running around $30 a foot for an average. When they get too much work, all the small guys like you see, Dara or Gaby, Excel, CT actually is in Hawks Rest. Those guys get all the overspill work, and they're typically paid 20 of that $30. The master contractor never even shows up, and they just made however much money, but they're landing in deals that are running hundreds of miles for AT&T.
They sub
Verizon.
now, they sub all the time.
Right. So what I've done, I know the guys that are in the business, I've skipped all the big guys because I know what rate they're gonna give me. It's nothing that we can A, afford, B, work with, or C, make any sort of short-term recoup on it. So I talked to Dara, Excel, the smaller guys, and I got Gaby and Dara both to agree to a flat rate. Based on that flat rate, I'm able to figure out what a project's gonna cost.
And you provided that at the last meeting
Right.
as part of the attachments.
Correct. And that's where the $15 a foot is the labor for doing all the work and then whatever materials are added. Pulling conduit, for example, the $15 a foot is the charge for setting up the directional drill, boring 600 feet, whatever that works out to be, and either pulling back one conduit, two conduits, 5 conduits, whatever fits on the end of that pole, whether it's microduct or whatever sizes they're getting yanked back. To them, it doesn't matter. They sent that drill out, they brought the drill back, it went 600 feet, so you're charged 600 times 15. That's how that works out. So the conduit
It's
method.
cheap, you gotta pull as much as you can.
Exactly. Anytime if you're worried about capacity in a conduit, or we're gonna work in an area we see that we may be jumping off, rather than pulling a single conduit in, we'll hook up on our swivel, we'll pull 2 or 3 conduits, and we'll leave 2 or 3 of them empty. That way, next time we come around, if we decide we're gonna head down another road, we don't have to try to fight the conduit we've already put in to sister another fiber in there, we just use one of the empty conduits and go. And your cost to do that really doesn't change much. The conduit's 30, 40 cents a foot.
Where I was going with that is I don't think our consultant, first I was wondering, are our consultants ballpark numbers from the averages that they assessed? Are they the same? Doesn't feel like it. Are they 30% less? Are they 80% less? I don't even know where these numbers are falling. Would you?
Falling
flex
is
that?
compared to what?
Compared, our consultants gave this high level, if we have somebody come in, or Charter was gonna lay all new fiber and backbone and drops at all the passes, you know, for 64 million. I think in that methodology that they used, it feels like you're coming in a whole hell of a lot less.
I'm looking at the actual build plan versus an average for an area. If they looked at an overview map and found out you have 600 miles of road in rural Wildwood, and they simply
Right.
took your
Right,
footage
it's a
and
bigger,
multiplied
bigger
by
sense.
that.
picture of it, and I don't know how close they are to your real life, if I can trust those numbers. I'm not saying I do or don't, this makes sense, but how much different are they? I mean, would this high level calculation that our consultants are doing, that they didn't give us, obviously, the 460 homes you're quoting, would they have been, you know, 10 million? I don't know.
It may be, it depends on the numbers they worked with, and that's where Scott's point came into, that's where you get into plant design. You can look at an area, add up the amount of footage of road you have there, you can throw a price tag on it, you know you won't exceed. But when you get to the actual plant design, down Vixen, for example, with passive optics, there's no need to send a ribbon down that street, so we'd send probably 24 count, or if it's a road with 3 homes on it, and there's 5 parcels total, and we put 1 tap down there, I'm not gonna send main line down it, I'll use another piece of drop.
I'm just concerned, and I really love the numbers you're throwing, but, you know, because we're kind of going, probably eliminating the A, B, C, and D because they're 49 to 64 million, but are we eliminating because they're so high?
Yes.
So I agree, we are, kind of.
I would like to see a
There's no
plan
doubt.
design to get
Scott
the
would like
real
to,
number.
I hear what you're saying, is you'd
Isn't
like
that
to see
where the RFP
more
comes in?
calculations on how you get to, how you pay for those numbers, but I think if those numbers are way too expensive, are we really eliminating, are those the real numbers?
Are
Would you say,
including-
Joe, that
including electronics?
our
No.
agreement with
Electronics would be
the
mine.
consultant would cover evaluating this information? I mean, I would think so. It's like a sanity check, kind of.
Well, we've asked Mr. Ask to look at Mr. Bay's numbers, and just to give us his perspective, CTC's perspective
Good.
on whether this is there.
As we get down to
So I just asked a
$2,000 a
question,
parcel.
let's just real quick, this is attractive to us, right? This is the whole lease, the incentive thing. But, you know, this does not include the electronics, which is not, the outside plant's way more than the electronics. Or the O&Ts that he's covering on the home, right? That's part of his cost to serve,
Right.
right? And then it's, any other connectivity and things of that nature is not on this, right? So and plus, you know, this does not include the drops either, right? You take care of the drops, or
Right.
not?
Drops from my part. This is.
So he's saying to run basically a fiber backbone, where we're giving him an incentive. He's saying this is what it would cost. So remember, drops could be, he's done the averages on that, he knows what it would be when he passed them, and so he's gonna pass them if it makes sense. If you build a huge network from scratch, you're gonna have a different, probably design look if you're looking at all 6 wards all together, because you would build ring topologies, you would have redundancy, you would have nodes and access points in certain areas, so you can go here and there. He's saying, I've got access to fiber somewhere, I guess Ameren or somewhere there. And he said, I'm gonna run it straight, and I can pass these homes, and I'm gonna do it the most economical way, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that, but it doesn't include the drops, that's on him. Doesn't include the electronics, which is on him. And he's saying,
He's saying that makes it.
He's saying, give me $1
He's
million.
saying that's a business model you can support. Is that what
he
you're
says,
saying?
give me $1 million for incentive,
Right.
which fits this, number F, I guess. Give me $1 million incentive and you own the conduit.
And that tells me that it's a different day than when this was done before, and that we need the idea of putting out the RFPs
Well, and.
and engaging in by parcel, or not by parcel, by ward rather, by underserved, no service areas, that there may be a whole lot more information to come out.
So think about this as a cash incentive of $1 million, and we're talking about the $62 million in hay. But now, just from that incentive, as it works here in this ward, it worked for you, 460 homes, 597 parcels. The capital expense for cash incentives is 2.5 million to 3.5 million. We're at $1 million right now based on what the consultant tells us. So I think once you start asking the questions, it's gonna make sense.
Yeah,
But not everywhere is there 460 homes that he can pass. It's very economical for his business. So there's gonna be other areas that are challenging, more expensive, but from a cash incentive, based on what the consultant told us, we're at $1 million right now, just for owning conduit. That's what we got out of the deal, so we're 1 million owned, 3.5 million if you wanna take the
Well,
house.
see, that's where I was starting at. If there's really, if that's only a third of the homes, and you were off on that number, then we're actually at 3 million for the conduit.
Well, the thing is that that's why the hybrid of the difference, let's see, D, E, and F, I guess, makes sense. We wouldn't build the entire network, but there'll be
Right.
certain areas where we have to. So for Ward 6, to service these 460 homes, or 597 potential homes, if you count the parcels, it's $1 million. So there's the hybrid that they recommend and with the numbers. So at first, when you ask the question, I'm like, yeah, these numbers are not jiving, but as I started looking at it, I'm going, oh, okay, there's $1 million right there. They said, so I guess when you ask, he will go into detail of what he means by everything. And then you have middle mile fiber, right?
And we don't know, by the way, we were clarifying whether this was, because you're gonna, with this plan before it says you're lighting up homes you've already lit up with the
Some of them.
radio signals and everything else, right?
To a degree, yes. There's a couple of pieces to this. There's areas that we serve well enough for today, but it's not gonna make it till tomorrow. What's coming down the pipe on the wireless, as everybody knows, is everything's going line of sight small cell, which is not going to help Wildwood. So right now, we serve most of this area, but in 5 years, I think we're gonna be recategorized as we're back to square one. We have nothing to
Well,
work
that's what
with.
we're worried about here, the future proofing, and that's
Right.
because it's a short timeline. We're
Right.
really out of the business.
And that's a huge part of this plan. The other part, there are small areas that we were never able to get the wireless to work successfully, or we're almost there but not quite, and there isn't an economical method to get it done, or we're not getting neighborhood participation, or we're struggling to find a spot to put another small pole. Whatever the case may be, there are a couple one-offs mixed in here that we were never able to properly serve. So part of this that would close those gaps, and other areas we've just never successfully gotten infrastructure built into. Hankin Valley is one of them. We tried to put a pole in there, but the people in Hankin Valley didn't want it, so that's left that spot unserved. So that would be a spot that we picked up. Buckboard is another area that is marked on here to be served, that we have something in there now. It's not much. I'd like to see a lot more in there, but it's, to my standards, inadequate, but it's better than the absolute nothing they had. Fox Mountain, there's a couple of places that we struggle to serve the load on the network. I'm trying to think of the name of the other roads. Off of Model Realty, the road that kind of snakes in and around east of Fox Mountain, we have very poor coverage there. So this fixes a lot of those potential areas while future-proofing the bulk of the network. And the way I have this set up, and I don't know if it's legal for the city to do for other providers, but in my opinion, when these projects are chunked out and done, I think it should be, the city should require our providers doing it to fill in the entire segment that's being awarded in that. So using Fox Creek, for example, if it's agreed upon that that particular project goes forward from, not necessarily a Wildwood resident, but as someone from the area, if the city can, I think that they should require our providers doing it to, here are the homes, we will provide this, provided you cover every single home in this group, no exceptions.
In other words, no cherry picking.
Right, no cherry picking.
Yeah, any provider, if you're gonna provide broadband, yeah, that's, I think, check with the attorney, but that's typically,
Gotta cover it all.
I think that's doable, so that makes total sense. So-
Mr. Asp even mentioned that as part of his presentation, as part of the negotiation on any contract, we don't allow gaps or holes to be left,
Right.
Good.
regardless if it's more expensive for the provider to get service to them.
Good.
So Chris,
I'm curious about something, oh, good.
I like these details because it really gives us something to chew on here and compare, actually, on the ground, your numbers. Just to be clear, so this cost per home, you pick up all the rest, like you were pointing out, electronics, the drops,
Right.
all
that's-
all that equipment, and are you building in this, because I don't see in here, huge rate increases or anything? I'm just trying to get clarification on all the points.
No, our cost saving actually comes in the future. The thing with wireless, once we've built it, we gotta do it again in 3 or 4 years.
No, I get it.
So our cost saving comes in when it's 3 or 4 years down the road and it's time to redo the network. We don't have to now because it's already future proof.
Your service rates, though, to the customer
Are not changing.
Unchanging, okay, that's.
He does a cost to serve, and he charges $80 for a gigabit, or he charges $200 for a gigabit, or
Right.
whatever they want. And so he knows whatever, I don't know, I'm not asking what your ROI is on the equipment. So he could say, it could be every 3 years, he says, okay, I need to get all my money back, and then he's making pure profit after 3
You know what?
years.
But it could be established in an RFP too, that there's some type of competitiveness clause in there. It would maybe not dictate the price, but that it has to be within, certain amounts competitive to other offerings. And I think that might be something to think about if we went down that route. But I'm kind of curious about one thing, and pardon my directness, but Whisper, you're serving Ward 1, and as I said to Nathan when I saw him at the last conference, I'm not seeing a lot of drive. I'm not seeing a lot of interest, and I'm hearing kind of radio silence during this discussion.
Sure.
I know that Whisper is quite involved in a federal grant that was received, but I'd like to know what is Whisper's interest and willingness to do something to help the residents of the area you serve.
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely willing to help out any way we can. I mean, currently, we're just serving wireless customers from 6 of our poles. We have a lot of challenges in the area with wireless and hills and valleys. So currently, we're looking at adding some non-line of sight gear to the Batwood Park Tower, which will require another engineer survey to figure out, mounting and everything. So we have to get that reevaluated so we can provide better service to some of those customers. Currently, we just don't have any fiber ran in any part of our network in the Wildwood area. But I mean, moving forward.
Do you have it elsewhere?
What's that?
Do you have the fiber elsewhere?
Yeah, we have fiber elsewhere on our networks. We just don't have it in the city of Wildwood.
I mean, you've been listening to Chris's layout here, you probably have this in front of you, I'm thinking, have you talked to Nathan about that possibility?
Yeah, I mean, our plans with our CAP funding coming up, we're gonna be deploying a lot more fiber and definitely, getting into more of that so we can provide our top speeds for customers.
I know you just landed a bunch of big grants, right? Was it like 200 million or something?
Yeah, it's $220 million.
Yeah, so, is any of that, I mean, we eliminated grants from our consultants, but is any of that available for you guys working?
I'd have to check our CAP funding maps. I'm not sure if, I think,
So,
No, we
so
looked
the
at-
consultant said, because we're St. Louis County and it's considered a metro
I
area,
didn't know if they're.
that we do not qualify for any grants as the ones that would be accessed to, say, Franklin County over the water.
Right.
So what he's saying, he's gonna have to check with CAF, they may say where he can use.
yeah, I mean, we have our maps where the areas our CAF was, so we can double check those maps. I think we showed that to the consultant when we sat down with them the first time on a private session with them and showed them.
I didn't know if the terms.
Kind of the areas
were a
and
little
that.
different than the consultants were aware of, is all.
But yeah, I mean, our plan is to, try to get our better, because we have a new hub built on the Batwood Park Tower, the bandwidth coming in, so we want to try to get that reevaluated to get our non-line of sight equipment up and running. Moving forward with our CAF funding, we're definitely looking at a lot of different options to provide higher bandwidth with wireless equipment. And then, of course, just kind of getting the leads from our maps of where customers' interest is the most, where we need to put poles and stuff at. To be able to provide service.
So if you did roll out fiber, you probably, I'm thinking, Chris, you would be doing the same thing. You'd be keeping everybody lit up with your existing technology and And
Yeah, and
So-
honestly, it makes the install much easier. So once you get to the house, you just gotta switch it from one spot to another spot and you're done.
Right.
So, Joe, in terms of timing, if you go back to the consultant and say, ask for a proposal to do an RFP, then do we have to schedule another meeting and then have a vote on that?
Now, shouldn't the city council then would have to approve whatever we recommend?
Yeah.
So even though the money's already been allocated, we still would have to go through a council vote on it.
Yes, ma'am.
Can I make a motion that we approve
I think Joe
having
said
them
he-
conduct an RFP so long as that fits into the original funding that was put there? And then that way, if you get it, we can go right to the council piece, or no? Trying to think of what we can do to start making some time, because
Sure.
the problem just gets worse by the day.
We gotta get the consultants to find out if we can negotiate more to the agreement, right? We don't even know that yet.
I understand Councilmember Jordan's urgency. Obviously, this has been ongoing for a number of years. If you all want to make a motion that we solicit a proposal for the development of an RFP by CTC relative to the information that they've provided and the information we're going to give them from tonight's meeting, that'd be fine. I'm sure you want to see it, though. And
I agree.
Yeah, we'd need to see the details.
So my
of it.
question is, what is the RFP? I mean, I know we've talked about a lot of ideas. Are we gonna send an RFP and say, and take D, E, and F? That seems to be the general discussion here. And say, hey, the city is looking for proposals to do dark middle mile. Let's see, cash incentives is on us, so, and wants to lease fiber. So we're interested in who might want to come in and serve.
I think that it would be a variation of that, but the difference, where I would enhance that is that to serve all unserved, underserved areas within a given ward by ward. And that, you know, so someone wouldn't have to take the whole city in order to get it right. But, yeah, just I would clarify.
Well,
it so
I'm just
that-
trying to help Joe with what he's going to
Yeah.
ask CTC. Do you know what you want to ask them? Maybe that'll save us a bunch of time here.
let me tell you what I'm thinking, and then you tell me how wrong I am.
Please.
How's that?
No, I'm all for it. I'm not sure what to say here.
So I'm thinking that the RFP focuses on the dark middle mile. And that as part of that RFP, we state that we may be able to provide certain incentives, cash incentives, to assist in the development of
Why
that.
you get paid the big bucks.
And then,
He's over
if
it.
there, and then utilizing what we have, the resources in place, how does that benefit? Is there any benefit to the extending high-speed internet access, being approaches G and H?
So do we want to break it out by ward to
That would
say,
be my
tell
next question.
someone to do, break it out by ward? So Bay says, bam, here's my proposal for Ward 6 and for this area. And then others may see, Whisper in Ward 1 may say, man, I've got the same thing and I can do the same thing. I got 500 homes and however many parcels. And then we're getting people that are existing kind of served quicker. And we just need to do, and I'm not advocating assessment, but I keep saying that $1,700 assessment per parcel pays for this thing, pays for our part.
That's what I was just gonna say, you're down under $2,000 per drop. I mean, you have a lot of participation by the homeowners. there.
There's a lot of homeowners that have school children.
We were talking
that
people
have
that
to go to
participate if
the,
they're $15,000 to
bread
$20,000, but if you're down below 2,000,
people are paying $400 and they can't even do their schoolwork. They're paying $400 a month. You can do the math, what they're paying per year. That's 4,000. They may say, this is nothing.
that's not.
We focus on
2%.
wards 1 and 6.
Some will.
Yeah,
But
some, but
2,
you need a lot.
3, 8 has rural areas that do not have high-speed internet access. Bay's has been contacted, Bay's ET's been contacted by people on St. Paul Road, which is in Ward 8, as I recall. So I think by doing it by ward is actually very reasonable. Because there are pockets even in some of the more populated wards that have poor service or no service.
So Chris has a lot of information on that as well as Wildwood, so you guys share that information, I think. I don't know if Whisper has,
Both have leads.
Yeah, we have a lot of lead maps that show like where all the failed leads come in at and where the current existing customers are located.
So I'll make the motion that you just said, that we solicit proposal for RFP by ward, using the middle dark fiber, and remind me of the rest of the words.
And offer as part of that dark middle mile, cash in some potential.
I have a suggestion.
Yes.
I have a suggestion here before we do this.
Okay.
You and Kathy, we can all take a restroom bio break or something. You and Kathy write up this motion of what it needs to say, so we're not all over the place, so it's very crystal clear. And then you read the motion and we move forward. Because we're kind of like, I want to make sure we're saying it the
I
right
want to make
way.
sure we're actually asking them to stop and do the right thing. Are we asking for, going out for requests for proposals right now? Or do we want to engage our consultants to use some of this hands-on data that we currently have from our current providers and tell us what it would cost for them to do it?
Yeah.
And then we could extrapolate from there. That's at least our baseline to know if we're going to move ahead with, I'm proposing as a possible
Do we even need a
alternative.
motion? Can Joe just take this action item and go to the consultants and come back and advise us on the correct course of action?
Well, we're kind of telling the consultants that we want to go with, we're eliminating the first page, A, B, C, and D. We're looking at E, F, and G.
Since we're not sure what it would look like, because the consultant may
And we're
come
not
back
sure their
and
numbers
forth,
are right on
and
the money.
they may
They got
say,
hands-on numbers. Maybe we're saying,
well, we need a request for information or proposal, whatever, of saying, hey, how would someone might serve? We would look and Bays would.
how would
respond.
they lay out by ward from an economic perspective? And then maybe they would, if we felt like it, could come up with also the proper RFP. I mean, just to keep everybody honest.
Right. Well, if we had it by ward, then every council person can go back to their ward and say, hey, there's an assessment of $1,700. Make it real simple. Let's say if we went with your plan, and there might be negotiable.
Well, maybe it would be 1,700.
Maybe more, I don't know.
No, maybe, I don't know, Joe, we've been allocating money for wireless, I'm sure we'd allocate some money for fiber, so it may not be 700.
Couldn't these things, Joe, that they're talking about all be part of the request for a proposal from the consultant to develop an RFP by ward? I mean, isn't that all kind of part and parcel of that process?
I'm hoping that it is.
I mean, because
one
it
of the
wouldn't be
things-
that expensive, I wouldn't think, to create the RFP or RFI or whatever you want it to be, right? It's going to be the evaluation and learning and the crafting and all that that's going to be the money. And
I'm thinking though that CTC understands the importance of the ward boundaries, because that was one of the first pieces of additional information they asked Kathy and I to provide, was the ward map, so that they could have an understanding. So
So we've narrowed, Joe, we've narrowed this down. I mean, that's kind of the ones we want to do. We want to say, what is our top method, what the top things we want to do here on this sheet? It's the last 4 of them. It's not the first 4. I don't know where I was going to go with that.
And we've established that we want to make it ward inclusive. If you take it, you take it all.
Broken by ward. And then some actionable numbers of that. Now, how do we get those actionable numbers? Do we let them take numbers from our current providers and use that as our baseline, and then also come up with an RFP if we want to go to the market with those?
I'm not
numbers
sure
there?
we actually, until Joe talks to the consultant,
We have
say,
to know.
this is what we're thinking about. So what I would ask is that can Joe take just I don't know, we need a motion. He could just have an action item.
How much more will the consultants do, you're going to say?
Well, no, he's gonna have a discussion and they're gonna think this through, right? And say, okay, here's the things you're not thinking of. He's gonna be able to give us better information. And then what I would like to ask is, can we do this via email correspondence? I got back with it, and then on the board I was just on, we had bylaws where we allowed electronic meetings, which are not public, I guess, so I don't know how we could do it as a city. But then we could just approve, yeah, Joe, go ahead and go down that
I
road.
don't know those rules.
So we may have to convene, right?
Right.
And so he's saying we gotta convene again. I think,
And we
my
might just
opinion
short
is, if we
meetings.
do a motion right now, we gotta go back and revise the motion and.
I mean,
so
I
on
can
and
do a
so forth.
motion though for anything. I mean, it's allowed, so.
Right.
I mean, I would like it on the record, I would like it that we are moving to action on this. That's the reason I want to do a motion.
Again, the motion could be as simple as
Okay,
you're asking the department to seek a proposal from CTC to either provide an RFP or RFI that addresses the last four approaches
By ward.
by ward. And let's leave it at general enough.
okay.
And then we have a call scheduled with them tomorrow, so I'll explain.
So are you making that motion that he
Yes.
just said, share, for the record?
Will you second
Cheryl,
that motion?
I will second it for you, Cheryl.
Thank you.
And
What Joe
so-
said for you.
So do we have, since there's a motion on the floor, do we have discussion, Mr. Chair?
Good, that's the proper protocol.
That
there
is, I'm helping you with the Robert's
Thank
Rules
you
of
very
Order
much.
here. No discussion?
Do we have a
All in
quorum, I
favor?
hope?
Aye.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion
Yeah,
carries.
aye.
Okay.
I'm not asking you to repeat that.
No, I'll do that
but
break.
Send it to us later.
I will,
Okay.
after we talk with.
All right, I think that's a pretty good start. I'm sure you'll probably be back. Do we want to, I think Cheryl's taking a break. Do we want to do that? And do we have, what's the other order of business today? Here it
For the
is.
most part, public comment.
Okay.
Let's get to that then.
You want to just not take a break and do that? That's fine by
Well, I
me.
think we still need a break.
I'm good. I don't need one.
No, I'm good. State your name, address, and make a comment if you have one. Who wants to raise their hand first? Go ahead.
Actually, I have some technical questions from these guys. Do you have stations that are receiving signals from some other location and sending you internet signals, and then you're redistributing those currently to your households by radio frequency signals, right?
Correct.
What happens if you have several stations that receive the signal and then redistribute it by fiber optic to the homes? Can you do that?
That's how we're starting with Hawks Rest.
Hawks Rest? Okay, the next question is, how many households homes can you distribute off of one pole, one receiver that gets a signal, your central signal?
It's got a massive asterisk on it. It can be very few or many thousands. It really depends on the
Really? Okay,
technology.
it depends on the individual fibers that you can split off to the individual homes?
Not necessarily the fibers, the wireless technology. The biggest problem in the wireless microwave world, you have capacity and range, and then the price tag. The more capacity you have, generally, you start to fall short on range, and then the price tag also kind of goes with that.
Okay, the next question is, how many receiving stations do you need to, say, for example, to cover 500 households in a section like Ward 6 or Ward 1 or 6?
So,
How many receiving stations would you need to be able to send enough of the signal to the fiber optic to distribute to the houses?
there's massive variables in that. It can be 1, it can be 10. It really, really varies.
Okay, the reason I'm asking you these questions is because I think that the solution to this problem, at least for the moment, would be to have several receiving stations that then are distributed by fiber optic to the homes. If the technology were to change later on the reception capability, you could still hook up the fiber optic at your central nodes at a later date. But for right now, you still use the wireless connection to your stations to be redistributed to the households. The next question is, how much would that kind of thing cost per household roughly to run fiber optic from a central station, from your central receiving station to the household?
It's, again, that's going
That
to vary.
varies on the distance, right?
It's going to vary in the distance, population density, the ground conditions. There's, unfortunately, the variables to that are massive. They're actually far more variable than just.
What did it
running a
cost
pure
you,
line.
roughly speaking, when you did it at Hawks Rest?
The total project, we estimated, I want to say 185,000 is going to be the total once we're done with it.
185,000?
between the network upgrades.
And how many houses did you distribute to?
There's 98 parcels.
And you charge homeowners accordingly by dividing that 98 into the cost, right?
They're not paying
Yeah.
for it.
They're not paying for it.
He's
okay. You got a
covering.
grant for it, right?
No, it's a proof of concept project. It's,
Okay, well, let's assume for a moment that there's no grant, there's no money from any other source, and you want to redistribute those fibers to the homes, and the homeowners would have to pay for it. The question I'm asking you is, how much would it cost individual homeowners to get the fiber connection from your receiving stations to their homes? Because I think that people would be willing to do that. We got a rough cost right now, about $7,000 to run just fiber optic, but we don't have a provider in Ward 1, and there's a group that's looking at a private co-op. Instead of having little groups running all over the place trying to do these little projects, I think that what we need to do is do this as a project for the whole gamut of area that needs that service. So what you really need is you need a cost estimate on what it takes to get the signal to your central stations and then redistribute it by fiber optic to all the necessary homes that want it.
for an overall project, that's actually far more expensive than fiber optic end to end. The equipment to go from pole to pole is quite expensive, then we have to install temperature controlled head-ins. The size of the equipment gets to be quite cumbersome versus having fewer wildwood, for example. The way it's been done in Hawks Rest, that one head-in has the capability to serve the entire Ward 6 area.
Where did the source come in for the fiber optic that you distributed? Where's it coming from?
Coming in on microwave, but it's not going to be able to serve the entire ward capacity-wise from that. That's going to have to be fiber brought in from another source, so we're building it in from Pacific.
Well, there's the problem. I mean, basically, you gotta have a source that gets to a central location for redistribution. I mean, everybody does that. I mean, no matter who it is, the fiber optic has to be hooked to something that sends a signal, right?
Yeah.
So let's say, for example, AT&T were doing this, where would their central signal come from?
Wherever they put their COs.
Well, then they're receiving signals, wirelessly to those communications as well?
No, there's the big thing you gotta keep in mind with wireless, the capacity limits. There's no wireless technology that's going to fit the need to gigabit to the home of the
Right.
entire community.
I understand that, but we don't have an option for going to a central station and carrying fiber optic from downtown St. Louis all the way out here to.
He's asking where your sync would be, I guess, for
Yeah.
Do you service Ward 1? I thought that was Whisper.
Well, I'm asking a general question. I don't know there's a division between these two. That's not
Used to be
important.
so.
What's important right now is how could it be done and who would do it. We'll discuss that later, but that's one of the options, is to have central receiving stations and redistribute that signal over fiber optic cable from the central receiving stations. But later, if you wanted to make a connection from some other point with just fiber optic, you would have your central receiving nodes already set up and you just bring the fiber optic to them.
The problem is the capacity. It wouldn't be any better than it is today on an all wireless transmission.
So you're telling me basically that it's not gonna solve the problem, but it solves this much of a problem. There are people now that have nothing. And I understand that the speed that you're gonna be able to provide them using wireless communication is not nearly as good as it might be with direct fiber connection. But right now, we got people with nothing. And the problem with having nothing is that not only is that bad for them that they can't use the internet, they can't get information over the internet, it's costing them money in terms of their homes. When we were talking about the $7,000 that I mentioned, if you do that and you have direct fiber or whatever you have, and you've got internet service, you can add that $7,000 back to the cost of your house that right now you can't get because you gotta keep dropping the cost of the price of your house if you wanna sell it. Am I making sense?
That's what we were talking about early in the meeting, when I said, let's do a study and find out what it would cost to build it all out. So you've got 98 homes, and this is the Lexington, Kentucky people, I'm guessing. They're saying $7,000, fine. I can't do it. So if you can find out where your fiber access is, I think Whisper does Ward 1, not Bays. But he's saying, give me fiber all the way there, tell me what the price tag is. If it's $7,000, great. If it's $50,000, no, we're not gonna do it. Anywhere in between. So if you have folks like that wanna help you get started, that helps with this whole hybrid planning. So there you are in Ward 6.
But if you only have 10 of those, you're not gonna have enough money to.
That's
pay for the
correct.
Backbone.
That's correct. But if you got fiber, now he has access to more fiber for other homes, and he's able to hook into it by the run just to the 98 homes. There's things that these guys can look at. And then you're saying, hey, If it's $7,000, we'll recoup that when we sell our homes, or we'll recoup that in whatever way, so.
Right. We're
But
looking
how
at
will
that.
you feel if right after that, then you're seeing the other neighbors and they get it for less than that? How angry are you
That's a
gonna be knowing
discussion
that we
that
knew
Ward
up
1's
front?
council member has to have with people, and that's what I said. There's people that are gonna be upset that more wealthy areas get it, but it helps you get access to fiber deeper and deeper. It's not the best plan, but since,
Yeah, but if you organize it up front and do all the coverage, if you're down under 2,000, I mean, you have a much larger group
Maybe
of people
so.
that buy into that in quantity.
To circle back around that discussion, that $7,000 mark sounds awful familiar. I'm guessing you're near Homestead Estates.
That's correct.
That proposal is actually given by us.
Was that given by you?
Yes,
It has to run fiber from one of your nodes now?
not one of our nodes. That's pulling fiber in off of AT&T. The problem with AT&T, if you're not waving big money in front of them, they don't care. It's not there.
Yeah, I know, they're a pain in the neck.
But the problem up there is the cost of construction and how sparse the area is that needs covered, and then the minimum commit, which is why those numbers arrive the way that
There's a
they
lot of
did.
density there that you guys may not know about. There's Shiloh, there's Homestead Estates, and all those houses.
Shiloh,
along
Homestead, and
Mountain Road.
Smiley were involved. There's 143 parcels that was covered with that project, which the problem with that density is that 143 is a good number to work with at this project, but pulling open fiber from AT&T is very expensive. So 143 parcels to work with versus the monthly reoccurring that's going to be from AT&T just to carry the data there, it's very hard to break that out.
So you guys wouldn't be in charge of actually providing the internet, the service, it would be AT&T providing the communication?
At the exchange point, AT&T will be bringing our data for us through their network to that
I'm not sure
neighborhood.
that I want AT&T involved.
so the way it works is a carrier provides the long haul.
Yeah, I got you.
Okay, so down in 6, you're accessing Ameren's fiber, aren't you?
No, AT&T.
You still got
You can't-
AT&T fiber?
You can't get in the hammer and they won't let you.
They've actually told our consultants they're gonna help us.
Yep, Ameren's.
Ameren's gonna help.
Ameren's flat off on both of us.
They got religion, huh?
Well, they got some grant, they got some
Legislation.
incentives from the government to,
Well, and there's a lot to it. I mean, Ameren makes money on selling electric. They're looking at all this land that's not developed. They can't sell electric to it. So something that's no skin to them, they're not using the optics. They have no future need for it, so
I
let's.
guess the bottom line is the technology to do pretty much whatever you want to do is there. The next question is, what's the best technology? Fiber optic direct communication is the best technology. The next question is, how much is that going to cost on an individual household basis?
That's what
I
we're
think there are a
working
lot of people who would be interested in paying that price. There's one subdivision and Ward 1 that already did that, but they ran, I think, maybe they did with fiber optic, I think they got spectrum. They ran it out to Wild Horse Springs.
Yeah, it's coax unfortunately, and that's part of why we're focusing on fiber is everything has limits. Fiber has limits, but right now the ceiling on fiber is just crazy. So that's the
Ceiling on coax, how much benefit are you talking about there?
The-
Because I've got spectrum within 1,500 feet of my house and they won't come to me. So that's where I need Wildwood to help me, and
Well-
encourage them to service my neighborhood.
The problem is, if I remember right, you're a ham, correct?
Yeah, man, radio on
Then he actually understands a lot of the problem with coax and inherently.
radio. Of course, got a lot of line loss.
You have line loss, and that's a big problem.
It can't be any worse than the DSL I have right now from AT&T.
Well, the problem with the CMTS systems, what Charter uses to give internet on coax, you'll get to a point where even if you incur X amount of loss, you've got too much signal distortion, and it's gone. There is a hard break on the line where it cannot read what's on the other end of it. And
See, they're desperate, and these are people who want something, right?
I'm not desperate, I'm ticked off, honestly.
Well,
I would not have bought my house in Wildwood. If I could sell it right now and leave, I would. Because it's been 12 years of monkeying around with this, and nobody seems to be able to get it done.
And you know what?
And I'm mad about
And
it,
you know what?
frankly.
You know
Because
how
my
many
tax
times-
rates are going up.
You know how
I
many
I
times-
voted for the other guy because of his ideas about putting fiber in my house, frankly, so I'm glad you're here. Thank you for that. But I want it now. I don't want to wait any longer. I don't want RFPs. I don't want RFIs. I need service. It's a basic utility. I work out of my house. I can't work when my kids are home from school during the summer because of I don't have enough bandwidth to share YouTube streaming and video gaming and web conferencing, so I have to tell them to stop and sit quietly for an hour while I'm on a conference call. These are the challenges I have at my house.
Right.
I did not expect those. And Mr., I don't know, from Whisper, but when I bought my house, I was in your coverage area. It's been 4 years. I still can't get serviced by you. And frankly, a 20 meg service isn't gonna help me anyway, because it's not much better than the DSL I have. So those are my challenges. If you want some resident feedback, that's it. Fix the problem. Just spend the money, fix the problem, because we are way underserved. For the amount I pay for my house, for the amount I pay in taxes, I'm just beyond frustrated that it's taken this long to have zero action. So I appreciate your desire to have something actionable here, but I don't want to wait another 6 months or a year or whatever it's going to take for it to be done. I'll be gone. And I hate to hear that I can't sell my house for what I paid for it because I can't get a basic utility in Wildwood. So that's my input.
One point, and I'd like Mr. Vintage to explain it, because I understood when I went down there, when that was pulled in to help out, I don't know if I am. Property taxes in St. Louis County, does Wildwood get those? They do not get any property taxes that you're paying unbelievable amounts for Rockwood School District, does not come into these coffers. And I wanted that verified when you brought that up.
That's right.
Because they get their revenue from city taxes and so on and so forth, which is creating a challenge. I don't like paying what they're raising my rates in Wildwood too, and it really perturbs me.
If you look on your assessment, like I got one recently, unfortunately, right? You'll actually see the line item for Wildwood is 0.
Yeah. So
That doesn't take away from the problem, and I absolutely agree on the
How many dog
urgency.
parks, how many walkways, how many pedestrian bridges, over 100 have happened since I moved in? And I still can't work from my house without having to go to the Starbucks?
So,
I mean,
so this plan has got the incentives, we just went through that. I think in our, like I said earlier, if we find out what the price tag is, we got the gentleman award once at $7,000, we don't have a problem with that. I don't know what the price.
Well, not-
No, I know, I understand what
I
you're
can't speak
saying.
for everyone.
But you believe that you would have enough to say, hey, I can't sell my home. Maybe for you, maybe that number's 5, maybe it's 20. Well, I don't know what it would be, but if we start, once we know what the cost is, and then we're able to say, okay, we can run fiber here, and if you start building it a certain way, then you have more access, both of you gentlemen have more access to more fiber to take it further, and then you get into the whole incentive thing that, like you proposed. So,
you mentioned a quote from Charter earlier. I don't remember what the numbers were, but you seemed to be, I thought you said they were lower than you expected. Did I mishear
I thought
that?
these guys were.
Charter also gave an estimate. I mean, I know somewhere in the history, Charter made an effort to try to get into Wildwood and service, and there was no, 10 years ago, there was a decision to not allow them into.
Well, there's a lot more to the story, and
Okay,
Charter was not a
I
good
don't know all
guy
of
in the
that, nor do
story.
I care, but if they're trying to service
It
now,
was 3 million, then it was 6 million, and then there was a legal problem with it.
Well, all of
And
that
we
would
couldn't
come
make
out
it
as a result of putting forward, moving towards the point of requesting a proposal, and it's gonna take a proposal. I do have one thing I want to clarify, I believe, I feel the sense of urgency, I want to get something going now on this, but at the same time, and I want to see it be for everyone, not just those that can afford it here, because it is basic utility, as you mentioned. However, I don't think that would necessarily, and correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, because I don't want to misspeak, an action to do that would not preclude a given area from saying, you know what, we're ready to pony up 7,000 apiece and jump ahead of it, right? So, I mean, I have no objection to that. I just don't want to see that be our stage 1 and then wait and a year later do stage 2, and if, we get it approved at the council level, et cetera. I think the time, and I think the recognition of this being the problem that it is it's time for big action. I mean, nothing ventured, nothing gained.
Well, we gotta give direction to the city council as to what our action is. and
There
what
has
it's-
never been a point at any time since 2007, when this committee was formed, that we've told Charter, you can't serve Wildwood.
That's
No,
right.
we've encouraged them.
We've begged them to come into Wildwood, and their basic response is, our ROI does not work for you, sorry, period. And they've walked away. The one time we did have them at the table, they started at 2 million, they ended at 6 million, and there's a state statute that says we can't give a private entity your taxpayer money. We have to have some ownership or a way to recoup it.
And they wouldn't give it.
And Charter said, too bad, we're gone. So we've tried every way, and if you can
you're
convince
talking
them
about
to come.
64 million now. compared to 6 million in 2007.
That's for the entirety of this, of the city. Back then, it was just basically 1,600 households, and that's the cost they quoted.
Yeah, it's more like 40, but yeah.
Right. I guess what I'm saying is, if they want to come, they're more than welcome. They can come in the Bay ZT area, they can come in the Whisper ISP area, and Wildwood would not say a word.
What can the city do to help me as a resident to encourage them to do so? On my own, I can't. You as an entity can, and that's what I expect you to do as my elected officials to help me solve this problem.
Up until 2006, we could do something. Then the state legislature basically said, all the utilities, you don't need franchise agreements with the city anymore. It's your choice. And they basically stripped us of any power we have.
Okay.
It's called lobbying, probably.
Yeah. And from that point forward, if up till 2006, if charter provided service in a part of the city, they were obligated to provide it in all the city. 2006 on, the state legislature said, don't worry about it.
We lost our leverage.
Okay. I'll say one more thing and then I'm going to stop. So thanks for bearing with me. And
Sure.
I appreciate you. Obviously, I'm a little fired up about it, so thanks. You've been terribly impressive to me in the meetings that I've attended, so thank you. You've got a actionable proposal on the table from this gentleman who seems to have been a great partner of the city in some wards. And I heard, let's kick this back to the consultant and ask them to weigh in on it. And this gentleman's given you an actionable proposal with a price tag. If his numbers are right, why are you sending this back to a consultant to delay this even further? Why not take action on something that's there now? I know it's only for Ward 6. I'm in Ward 1. I'm not far from Bouquet. So if you're there, I know you're coming my direction at some point. So I'd rather see some action than see it go back to the consultant to spend more money to get approval to get an RFP when you've got a proposal on the table. It seems to me like there should have been some action on that. I don't know. Outsider looking
How do
in.
you know the answer to that?
Well, Mr. Bay contacted the Department of Planning and said that he was specifically looking at Homestead to do this fiber to the premise, like he's done in Hawks Rest. I said, oh, by the way, there's Shiloh, there's Three Sisters Farm, and there's probably others out there. I gave him contact information for those. So I guess what I'm saying is, I'm not stopping Bay ZT. If he can make it work without the city incentive, great. If he needs the city incentive, it's got to come through this committee first. And that's what we're doing tonight.
So for us, we can't take action tonight because we have $1 million on the table and he says it's conduit. So I believe at this particular point,
I need to give it to the consultant who does this across the United States and say, is this really a reasonable approach? Will it work? And if it does, and the consultant says it does, then I'll be back to this committee saying, let's try it.
In weeks.
And then the committee can make a recommendation to city council.
And if I may, I would like to suggest that when you get that information, that you reach out and see if we, can have an emergency meeting so that we don't
For sure.
dally,
For sure.
which might be tough with, anyway.
Have I respectfully established a sense of urgency? That was my goal.
Believe me, it's
Please,
been
help
here
me.
for,
It's your angst, well understood, that started the freaking committee to begin with, because there were so many people with that angst. And we've lit up hundreds and hundreds. I'm sorry it's not you, I wish it was. And we as a committee understand that if we don't keep paying attention to this, to your point, and have some more bigger pipes that give you higher speeds, it's still not gonna solve the problem. And those people who've already lit up are gonna be screwed again. So,
And
Agreed.
sir, this gentleman was exactly like you in 2007. He came to a city
your
council
office.
meeting. He stood up at the podium and said, I can do this in 6 months. You all can't, and I don't know what you've been doing, but you're
and I
not
need
doing
the
it
power
well.
of the city.
I won't be here in 12 years. I
Well,
can
I'm
assure
just
you of
saying.
that, because I can't work from my
He's-
house.
He basically said the same thing, and the council said, you're on.
But we're still working on it. I wish we had all the answers.
I
but we-
appreciate your patience and your diligence and your stick-to-itiveness for
I
it.
was the first sample, so yeah, I had 5 megabits, whatever number, 10 years ago. on the
And it
first-
wasn't bad back then.
No,
about what
but I
have
do
now.
want to,
Yeah,
want to
it-
say
it's-
one thing. A lot of the
What's up?
people in
What's
here are
up?
volunteers, and your passion is something that, I would encourage you to stay involved.
No,
And,
no,
the time may come where your passion, you could speak at the council meeting and things that would be necessary to take those next steps. So involvement of the public and passion is not something that we are against, we're all
Well,
for.
when we do go for a proposal, and I don't know exactly what that is yet to the council, that kind of presentation probably would be helpful.
Well, it gives us, we're back to the
Follow
opening. What was the opening with, I just use their little write-up here. You know, the number 2 paragraph, some kind of subsidy funding sources, that's where we're back. We gotta have a price tag. We gotta have a real price tag of what the city has, what their share is. And without something, we don't know what that price tag, we know what it is for 460 homes and 597 parcels.
And Joe, do we have
We
to,
don't
what
know
are the
if that's
rules
either.
from a council perspective or a city
He said we
perspective?
can do it.
If it goes out and let's say the tag's $1 million,
It's on him.
it doesn't have to go out for bid? Is that a requirement in the city? I assume there must be some level which it says you can't just arbitrarily go pick somebody, you need to,
Well, that was part of why I broke it into conduit, because that does give you the option to bid any number of utility contractors to come in and do the work. That does at least help with
That's a
that
very
part.
good point.
I mean, not that I'm trying to encourage that, but I'm just,
Yeah.
in terms of expectations and that.
What was the point? The bidding process that we're obliged to meet. So if we offer $1 million to Bays, do we actually have to open it to bid? So others could basically say, well, I can do it for less than $1 million.
So, I mean, we'll research it, that's something to check too.
That's the city attorney.
Know what our guidelines are.
Well, I just think when the RFI or P or whatever comes out, you know, what's the unique, people would come in and say, hey, we'll do this for this, and this would be the city's portion of it. And once we know those type of numbers,
Right.
then it's how do we get the funding? That's it. I mean, in a nutshell. keep
And
it
I'd
easy.
like to know from Nathan what bold action he might be willing to take, and I'd like to see him step up and have some
Thank you.
information and actually come to the next meeting and let
Sure,
us
yeah.
know that.
I'm gonna definitely send a follow-up email to Nathan and the guys at back at Whisper to.
To Cheryl's point, you raised one of the willingness of Whisper to participate in this process. Are you
Yeah, I wanna
guys
know
willing
if
to
you're
do
in
it
the
or
game
Yeah, I
or
mean,
not.
yeah, we totally are, for sure. I mean,
And I'd like to know
I don't
how.
mean to be so silent, but I just like, we just had a lot of challenges with the areas that we're covering with the
not?
poles and
Nathan
that.
can call Chris up anytime.
So, I mean, like I
you
said,
guys
we
talk
just.
every so often.
We
don't
do.
you? Yes.
Okay, I'm not trying to, I'm just saying.
No, I just, like I said, I mean, it's just been challenging. Like I said, we have some poles that we've been working with some leads on that we'd like to expand services to for sure, so.
It'd be a good time to see some action.
Anybody else in the public would like to say anything? We all good?
I just want, I can ditto what he's saying.
You
It's
concur.
the Same,
We all
same
concur.
argument.
Where do you live, sir?
Shiloh Valley.
There you go. You know how many times I've heard this? You know how many times I've heard what they just said?
I can assure you it's probably not as many as this committee has heard.
Or surprise.
It hurts every time, by the way.
Joe and I.
Is there any other business to attend to here tonight?
No, sir.
You have given up everything you need?
I'm actually going to do two things, the RFP, and then I'm going to have Mr. Ash or Ms. Hovis check out Bay's proposal.
Bueno.
And the legal questions that were asked. Okay, very good.
Sounds good. Boys are up 1-0, by the way.
I'd like to make a motion to close the meeting.
And reconvene as soon as possible. All in favor?
Second over here.
You read it
and all in
now.
favor. There you
The
go.
next meeting will be contingent on.
Yes, you'll send out.
Yes, I gave you the proposal to go back to the notes.
That's part two.
I know.
It's not, maybe not as part of getting
I think we get more done.
There's Shiloh, Three Sisters. It takes the 3 to have just enough homes to be able to cover.
Yeah, I know.
Actually, I'm gonna take this as a pretty good write-up.
So.
The HOAs.
Yeah, I'm not